Welcome back to Fox 5's On the Hill Live this Sunday morning. You know, President Biden this morning says he's going to be calling House Speaker Kevin McCarthy today as he makes his way back from the G7 summit in Japan, hoping to restart these talks on raising the debt ceiling. The White House and Republicans are blaming each other for this breakdown. Will a deal get done? Republican Congressman Bob Good of Virginia's 5th District joins us live this Sunday morning. And Congressman Good is a budget committee member. And Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. We thank you for joining us. Obviously, this is not breaking news. We knew that this debt ceiling was on the way. Congressman, why do we always wind up in this position that there is this, cataclysmic crisis of something that we knew was happening? It's almost like a kid who doesn't do his term paper, even though he knows the term paper is due.
Great question, and that's how we got to nearly $32 trillion in national debt. Both parties have been complicit and responsible for getting us to this point from the national debt. That's the highest percentage of GDP since World War II. Now, Democrats are better at spending than Republicans are, but again, Republicans bear some responsibility as well. But to your point, back in February, House Republicans began to work. We worked for 90 days negotiating a debt ceiling increase. As you know, the Senate and the White House were on the sidelines. They were not participating. They were watching the House, I guess, expecting us to fail with a narrow majority. Most Republicans did not want to raise the debt ceiling at all. Most Republicans had never voted for a debt ceiling increase. However, we came together for a responsible, reasonable increase, modest by D.C. standards of $1.5 trillion, in exchange for some reasonable cuts and reforms to put us on a path towards fiscal responsibility. That is the deal that could get through the House. The House, frankly, has completed its work, and the Senate should pass our bill. As you know, 45 Republican senators have signed on their support to that effect, and then the president should sign it, and then we avoid whatever consequences might come from a debt ceiling limit being reached.
Congressman, sometimes you can drive your car into a brick wall if you spend too much time looking in the rearview mirror. But one of the criticisms about Republicans in this current negotiation is that we didn't hear a lot about this concern of spending, when these debt ceilings were raised under the previous administration. So what about that? Why is spending such a critical concern right now when we didn't hear as much about that from Republicans when there was a Republican in the White House?
Well, you're correct that the past two Republican administrations were not very good on spending. And again, that's why I acknowledge that at the beginning of my remarks here. Many House Republicans did not vote for the debt ceiling increase. Again, under the Trump administration, most Republicans in the House have never voted for a debt ceiling increase, have continued to express our concern. However, House leadership on the Republican side joined with Democrats and passed the debt ceiling increase. Typically, when it was Republican administrations, it's been with a willingness to have more spending in return for increasing the debt ceiling. However, we are determined not to do what we've always done. We're giving Kevin McCarthy a chance to be a historic speaker who shows resolve that Republican leadership has not shown in decades, stares down the Democrats, tells them this is the responsible spending reforms. We're not going to raise the debt ceiling without cuts in spending. And Speaker McCarthy is showing effective leadership to that effect, and we're firmly behind him.
Congressman, sometimes, I walk around the halls of the House where you work, and I see these, marble busts of these former speakers like Joe Cannon. And you look back through history, when Joe Cannon said something, what Joe Cannon said happened. We've got Speaker McCarthy in office right now. If Kevin McCarthy agrees to something that your Republican caucus doesn't quite like, what are the possibilities that this thing is DOA in your House Freedom Caucus if you don't like what Speaker McCarthy agrees to?
Well, again, the deal that we negotiated, spent 90 days doing so, is what can get out of the House with a Republican majority. Again, a $1.5 trillion debt ceiling increase, either that or March 31, whichever comes sooner. It's got just cuts back to pre-COVID for non-defense discretionary. It's the American people, 80%, it's 80-20, favor cuts in spending in exchange for raising the debt ceiling. So that's what Speaker McCarthy is doing. That's what the House majority is doing, and we're united to that effect.
What if you get both, but they're not linked together? The White House wants to decouple these two issues. Raise the debt ceiling on one part, maybe agree to some spending cuts on the other part? Do these have to be linked in your view and those of your colleagues?
Absolutely. We're not going to raise the debt limit in exchange for promises of future spending cuts. To the point you made with your question, your appropriate question just a few moments ago, how did we get to where we are at $32 trillion? It's been both parties who've been complicit. This is a new Republican majority that is determined to do what the American people elected us to do. We're determined to keep our campaign promises. We're going to earn the trust of the American people that we can lead. We're going to earn a Senate majority. We're going to earn back the White House by bringing fiscal reforms that saves America from a financial standpoint for our kids and our grandchildren. We are not going to raise the debt limit without cutting our spending.
You know, the speaker criticized the president for going to Asia to the G7 summit and said they really couldn't do anything while he was gone. Didn't the president have to go over there and speak to our economic partners about this? Because this is not just an issue for the U.S. This will be a global issue if the U.S. defaults on its debt.
This is the most incapable, ineffective, incompetent president in modern times. I don't think he brings anything to the table from a discussion standpoint. We don't, frankly, need him at the table until it's time for him to sign the Senate bill when the Senate passes the House bill. The House has done its work. Negotiations should be over, quite frankly. The Senate needs to pass the Republican bill. It's the only bill. It's the House Republicans are the only ones who've done the work here, the hard work, quite frankly, to come together and negotiate something that we don't want to do. We House Republicans would like to cut so much spending up front that we wouldn't have to ever raise the debt ceiling again, and to put us again on a path where we are cutting our spending, balancing our budget, and saving the country from a fiscal standpoint. But we've negotiated an increase. The Senate needs to pass it. All the president needs to do is sign it.
We got 20 seconds. Would you accept a short-term deal?
No.
Debt on arrival?
Not going to do that. We're going to hold the line on the spending cuts and reforms we put in place. American people support that 80%. We're going to do what we said we would do.
All right, Congressman Bob, go to Virginia. We appreciate your time this morning here on Fox 5's On the Hill. I'd like to have you back real soon. That's